but let's talk about some contenders here who, are maybe more along the lines of locks to make the playoffs, but maybe still have something to prove here in their final 16, 17 games of the regular season. So I'll start in the East, Frank, where the team I had kind of circled was the Carolina Hurricanes. Like, I look at everyone else who's a legitimate cup contender, and I go, hey, those teams in the Atlantic, honestly, whatever they do down the stretch, it's going to be a dogfight no matter what in the playoffs. I look at Carolina and go, they're the one team, they've won 5 in a row now. They can change my opinion of them in this final month. Do you agree? Did you have another team?
I have another team. I'm going to go with the Devils, the team that's their likely first round matchup. I mean, we know that Jack Hughes is out. We know that Dougie Hamilton's done for the regular season. But when I look at that team, there was so much more hope and promise. And the Devils at one point earlier in the season, people were looking at as a legitimate Stanley Cup threat. They have a chance to make some noise based on purely just what you were talking about, that the Carolina Hurricanes, especially after this Mikko Rantanen trade, they're a team that can be beat in round one. Can you find a way to play better hockey down the stretch, defend better? The funny thing about the Devils season is their goaltending has been so much better than it has been at any other point during Tom Fitzgerald's tenure. And yet now all of a sudden they're missing the secondary scoring punch. They're missing some of the experience that they had on the back end earlier in the year. So they've got an opportunity here to play better and put themselves in a position to make some noise and create an upset that could then provide them some momentum heading into the summer.
Yeah, and I think that's an important one too, the momentum into the summer. Out west, Frank, I went with a pretty similar line of thinking. I looked at the Central and I'm like, okay, Winnipeg holds on to the top spot. I'm going to view them as a legitimate threat to go deep simply because of the presence of Hellebuyck. Dallas, Colorado, whether they win 3 in a row going into the playoffs or lose 3 in a row, that series is going to be an absolute coin flip. So I picked a team in the Pacific, and honestly, I'm not sure which one, but I really do think all 3 of them have something to prove down the stretch here.
I think the Kings have something to prove for sure. They're a team that also had a disappointing and or deflating trade deadline, didn't do much of anything. And now they've also played themselves into a position here, more so by virtue of the way that the Oilers have played than the way they have played, that they've passed Edmonton. Can you get home ice in round one? Can you position yourself in a downturn for the Oilers to, in the 4th year potentially that you're going head to head, can you knock them off in round one? I think the Wild also have something to prove. Can they be a team with more dimensions than, oh, this is the Minnesota Wild without Kirill Kaprizov? The next game that he misses will be his 30th game of the season. He's played 3 games since Christmas, just 1 game. He's played no games since January 26th. There's no clear timeline on his return, yet despite missing 30 games this season, Kirill Kaprizov still leads the Minnesota Wild in goals. It's a mind-blowing number. And yes, it hurts having Joel Eriksson Ek out, and they've had a tough run of injuries, but the Wild need to add other layers to their game to find that they can be a team that can compete.
Yeah, there's a lot of ifs on that Minnesota team for me. Can the blue line stay healthy? Will you get the Philip Gustafsson you got for the first 2 months of the season? And will Kirill Kaprizov even be in your lineup? And what's interesting about that, Frank, there was a point earlier this season, Kirill Kaprizov was the betting odds favorite to win the Hart Trophy, and injuries have taken him out of that race. So a nice transition to the MVP race this year. Yesterday, we talked Norris, so let's keep the awards talk rolling along here. Leon Draisaitl, it is Draisaitl versus the field right now. He's a minus 150 favorite, and I do think that's deserved. Not to be the Edmonton guy, but as someone who watches that team on a nightly basis, it is very, very clear who the only driver is on that team. And he is responsible for, or he's been in on 46.8% of their goals so far this season. And out of the 209 goals that they've scored as a team, he's been on the ice for 119 of them. That's 57%, a very high number. I think Draisaitl is the deserved favorite. Do you agree?
I don't. I can't believe that looking at this board, you've got someone that's minus money when Nathan MacKinnon has played as well as he has consistently from start to finish. I mean, you can talk about, like we can go back to the same old debate, but Rantanen's gone now. And what about the stretch of 20 games to start the year in which it was basically only MacKinnon, Rantanen, and Makar? It's great to have someone like Makar on the back end. And yes, I know Draisaitl's lapping the field in goals, but I mean, At what point has MacKinnon not played like a Hart Trophy favorite this year? At what point has there been a huge sag in the Colorado Avalanche season? It's been like a roller coaster for the Oilers. And I know Draisaitl is right in the middle of all of it and the one guy that there's no fault to pin on, but they didn't start well. Then they were excellent for a while. Now they're back down again. And it's like this team's all over the place. And he's the one guy showing up on a night-to-night basis. And you can make the argument, hey, that's exactly what a Hart Trophy winner does. But to go from minus 150 to plus 550, that's way too big of a gap, in my opinion. And I think if I were to be voting today, I'd probably have MacKinnon at the top of my ballot.
I do agree that it's Draisaitl and MacKinnon at 1 and 2. I always struggle with the goaltending side of it. You see Connor Hellebuyck at number 2 on the board. And listen, I don't want Carter Hutton to abandon his appearance in a minute here because I'm saying I wouldn't have Hellebuyck on my ballot, but I think I would have Zach Werenski at 3, Frank.
I was to answer the question in our title of the show, how many true MVP candidates are there? I think the answer is 4. Wow. I think it's Draisaitl, MacKinnon, Hellebuyck, and Werenski. And then after that, I think you have to squint real hard. Jack Eichel just set a new franchise record for the Vegas Golden Knights in points. He's been excellent. But I think when you consider the level that Eichel's at and the level that those other guys are at, there's probably a pretty clear gap. So Eichel would probably be the 5th guy on my ballot. But yeah, I think Werenski certainly deserves consideration. And Hellebuyck, we've talked about his numbers. We've talked about how it's not even a conversation for the Vezina, but Hellebuyck also has more wins in net than a team like the Oilers do all season long, just himself. So, I mean, he certainly is going to be deserving of that consideration. I think when it comes to adding the goalie into the mix, you have to really transcend the position. And I think going back to the Carey Price conversation from 10 years ago, Carey Price did that. Connor Hellebuyck has done that. He's going to get Hart votes.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.